Hay solo uno.
Buenos días.
The Global Village.
Decirles que vamos a hablar primero.
Primero hablamos acá y después igual te vamos a juntar. ¿Sí?
Okay.
No hay más que
On behalf of the Monroeville Public Library, I welcome you to the launch of Eulalia Press's first book, An Echo in the Park. My name is Dennis McDaniel, many of you know me. I'm a member of the Monroeville Public Library Board of Directors and chair of the English Department at St. Vincent College. I'm proud to be affiliated with the second of what we envision to be a series of events connected to the Human Dignity Project at Monroeville. The Human Dignity Project was conceived by the representatives of the library, including our director, Nicole Henline, Monroeville's Temple David, and the Monroeville Interfaith Ministerium, all of whom wish to remind us of man's humanity and to encourage hope for the future. Most of all, the Human Dignity Project wanted to show that Monroeville is a place that welcomes and celebrates all cultures, all religious traditions, and that it respects all individuals in their diversity. This diversity will ultimately be celebrated by work of public art to be located on the library grounds. Also planned are a series of educational and art-based events, among which was the presentation by Andrea London of her photography book, We Are All Related, which occurred on September the 18th, and today's launch of Jeannine Marie Pitas' translation of Romina Freschi's, Echo in the Park. Reflecting on the relevance of literary translation to human dignity, I'm mindful of the virtue of hospitality, which is a hallmark of the Benedictine monastic order that founded St. Vincent College. The rule of St. Benedict urges us to welcome the stranger as if he or she were God. This kind of welcome seeks not strangers to make strangers familiar or to force them to conform to the majority culture. Rather, Benedictine hospitality invites us to experience the mystery of the other, not as a threat, but as a joyful surprise of companionship and community which in its greatest form is composed of a diverse array of nationalities and expressions of self. Such a view of hospitality is grounded in the belief that communities are most effective not through conformity, but when the uniqueness of individuals is nurtured and the special gifts that the stranger provides are gratefully accepted and celebrated. Literary translation also draws from the virtue of hospitality. We tend to think that literary translation is a machine-like word-for-word representation that makes words from another language easy to understand, as if they were written by an American, at least in this case. However, genuine literary translation is in fact a creative process that invites us to learn from and appreciate the literary art from non-English speaking cultures. Literary translation does not seek to anglicize or Americanize foreign texts, or to otherwise make these texts conform to readers' ideologies. Rather, literary translation tries to convey the mystery of the foreign text and welcomes English-speaking readers to respect the strangeness of another culture. In doing so, literary translation invites us to join a global community of diverse perspectives and voices. It is our hope, through events such as today's book launch and other Human Dignity Project events, Monroeville may be an example of true community, a prospect that gives us hope for the future. I'm now going to present Michelle Gil-Montero, who is the founder and the creative force behind Eulalia Books, who will introduce us to the event.
Oh, can we clap for you, though? That was amazing. Oh, welcome everybody to what I hope will feel like a party, because I am celebrating very much what has felt like a very dizzying pleasure in bringing this press into existence, and in bringing this book into existence, and in bringing people together in this way. I want to begin on a note of gratitude. I want to thank John Bañuelos, an old flamenco friend, guitarist John Bañuelos, for being here to play for us in the beginning, and he's going to play for us while we do the book signing at the end of the event. I want to thank very much Jeannine Pitas, who has been our collaborator. She's a writer who we admire, and we sought her for this translation very hopefully that she would do it, and she's far exceeded our hopes in the work she's done. So thank you for being here and celebrating this with us.
Thank you for having me here.
And I also want to thank my Eulalia Books staff who are here, Bridget Fertile, where's Zach Tackett, hiding in back, I want to thank my interns, Michaela, Irina, Julia, and Danny. Eulalia Books is in many ways a teaching press. That I say that with an air of authority as if I were teaching them something, but in fact, of course, I am learning along the way with them. And so it's a real pleasure to have them here. For those of you who don't know me well and haven't heard me talk a great deal about the press, I'll just say a few remarks. Eulalia Books is a publisher of literary translation from Latin America, and we are perhaps unique in that we limit the books that we publish to works by writers who have not yet appeared in English translation. So all of the books represent a writer's debut in English. We do this because we very much believe, we've actually spoken about this together, reading the work from Latin America, we feel, gosh, if I give up my job and my family and I devote myself to 24-hour-a-day translation, I won't even do 1% of what needs to be translated. So it comes out of an anxiety in that sort of negative sense, but it also comes out of a great faith in the power of translation and the power of small presses to create new spaces for collaboration and to create new opportunities for conversation. So that's what the press is about, and I couldn't be happier with how this first book has exemplified that. I want to thank also Mark Hudson for hosting us, Nicole Henline. We are so pleased to have our launch event as part of the Human Dignity Project, and as Dennis just spoke, the connection was very poignant to us. So what we're going to do is I will introduce the book. I'll give a very quick introduction to Romina and to Jeannine, and then they will read from the book. And then I will ask a couple questions to start the Q&A, and then we'd love to open questions to you. And then the latter half of the event will simply be an opportunity for you all to talk more with Jeannine. She'll be signing books over there. Please help yourself. I didn't thank my mother, but my mom is here and she brought lots of food. So please eat that food. And John Bañuelos will be playing guitar. So Romina Freschi's Echo of the Park is a philosophical long poem that surveys made spaces, both elevated spaces and debased. In dialogue with First Dream by Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, a 17th century nun who is a crucial part of the tradition in Spanish, in the poetry tradition in Spanish, Freschi captures fleeting states of grace, such as ecstasy and bliss, and the ensuing gravitational pull of urban life's imperfect terrain. All urban spaces are interior and exterior, private and public, confining and freeing. Ultimately, the park and the parkified speech of the poem are sites of mourning. Can a former site of political violence be converted into a public green space? Jeannine Marie Pitas' nuanced translation presents Romina Freschi as one of the most singular and startling voices in contemporary Argentine poetry. Romina Freschi was born in 1974 in Buenos Aires, where she received her BA in literature from the Universidad de Buenos Aires. Her publications include Redondel, Estremezcales, Petróleo, El Pello, as well as chapbooks Soleros, Incrustaciones en Confite, Villa Ventana, 333, Solaris, Variaciones de órbita, Quien siempre gana es Poseidon, El ejercicio cósmico, and Eco del Parque. Lots of books. She has received a Fundación Antorchas grant, and in 2004 and 2006, she received grants from the Argentine government for her literary magazine, Plebeya. I should say that Romina is a mover and shaker in the small press publishing world in her own right in Buenos Aires. Her collaborative projects include the group Zapatos Rojos, the multi-space Cabaret Voltaire, and the project Living de Poesía. She's editor of the collection Arte Plegable and the independent publishing house Pájaro Solo Editora. Welcome, Romina.
Hi.
Hi. Jeannine Marie Pitas is the author of 3 poetry chapbooks and the translator of several Uruguayan poets, including Merosa Di Giorgio. Her first full-length poetry collection, Things Seen and Unseen, she'll pull it out right now, was published by Mosaic Press in 2019. She lives in Iowa and teaches at the University of Dubuque. I should have read a much longer bio for you.
They can ask anything they want to know. Yeah.
So I would love it if you would read for us. Perhaps you could read in English and then Romina could follow.
Yes. Okay. So Romina, we didn't really plan how we're going. When I did this
Hi,
before.
Jeannine.
Hola. Can you see me, or do I
I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Where do I have to go to be seen?
Here.
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 Hi.
Here.
Okay.
Ahora.
Entonces no planificamos eso. No. Bueno, me voy a parar para la lectura, ¿no? Es que no planificamos esto, pero ¿qué vamos a hacer? Yo iba a...
You want me to start in Spanish?
Tal vez sí, pero vas a simplemente leer, es que vas a saltar a varias partes del libro o...
Estaba planificando leer poema de por medio.
Ajá.
Sí. O sea, el primero, el tercero, el quinto.
Está bien, ok. Entonces, lo podemos hacer así.
Yeah, follow them.
¿Te parece?
Sí.
So I start.
Sure, yeah.
Can I say a few words?
Absolutely, please.
I'm really very, very excited and very moved for this edition. I've known Roman and Jeannine and Michelle and many people that work in this book for many years, and we had such wonderful conversations. I think this is great that I can meet you and maybe have new conversations. Poetry is a very small world, so each conversation I think is a treasure. So to having this book with so much work beneath, it's wow, amazing. I'm really grateful, and I feel really lucky to be here today. So thank you for coming, and thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Jeannine, Roman. Thank you, all the people that wrote in the back. I've known these people also for many years, and so I'm really happy and emotional and all that. So now I'm starting to read in Spanish. No hay paraíso en la tierra. Oh, wait a second. Yeah. Ahora sí. No hay paraíso en la tierra. Sus maravillas inmensas son hostiles, y en lucha con ellas gastamos fuerza, fe y voluntad. Sí, hay paz y éxtasis. Provienen, sin embargo, del temporal, crisis de las condiciones pactadas, destructor más creador de los mundos, manjares precarios, grandezas efímeras, deletéreas, funestas de la tierra.
There is no heaven on earth. Its marvels, immense, are hostile, and fighting them costs us strength, faith, and will. Sure, there are peace and ecstasy. They come nevertheless from the tempest, crisis of terms and conditions, most creative destroyer of worlds, precarious feasts, fleeting grandeur, injurious funereal ones of the earth. Puedes seguir.
Entráramos, no. Ausencia de gorrión, la tuya, pequeña sombra que a cierta hora del día se agiganta y confunde, la resolana. Es el aire y es el viento. En este área suburbana hay tesoros naturales que la ciudad no tolera, y aquí abrillantan la puesta de las luces. La conciencia es la misma, y luego del encandilamiento, el viento que siento, que reviento, trae el mismo aroma húmedo del cemento, con el mismo insecto, pero más grande, más oscuro, más nutrido, mejor alimentado.
A sparrow's absence, yours, a tiny shadow that at some point during the day magnifies and muddles the glare. It's air and wind. In this suburb, there are natural treasures that the city can't tolerate, and here they brighten the setting of lights. Consciousness is the same, and after the days, the breeze I feel, I blow up, carries the same wet scent of cement with the same insect, only bigger, darker, better nourished, better fed.
Crecidos los árboles, parece que saludan al cielo. Los álamos plateados, como plumas o penas, oscilan excitados por el viento. Su costado de plata parece que nos enriquece, sin tocarnos. ¿Cómo podría si llega tan alto, tan alocado? El sauce, sin embargo, con su llanto, alarga sus guirnaldas, cabellera enrulada, llega al suelo, y es el que nos abraza, nos acaricia. Su enredo de amor no miente, nos toca de verdad, toca la tierra.
The trees now grown, it seems they greet the sky. Silver poplars like pens or penises sway aroused by the wind. Their silver side seems to enrich us without touch. How could they if they grow so tall, so reckless? The willow, nevertheless, weeping, lets down its garlands. Its curly mane reaches the ground, and it is the one that hugs us, strokes us. Its tangle of love does not lie. It really touches us, touches the earth.
Sor Juana, Sor Sala, sin la ambición de los grandes árboles, hacías paraíso entre las macetas, y yo cultivaba mis ancas de aire, inmensas, gruesas, como pedos multicolores, para mullir. Las caídas, creía, y así andaba desconocida, con tu corazón emplumado, durmiendo justo arriba del mío. Como si el paraíso existiera bajo mi barbilla, tu corazón con el mío. El Edén no duró. Yo lo sabía, pero igual, trepaba el aire que hoy trepana.
Romina, you're choosing all the silly ones for me to read. Okay. Sor Juana, thrush.
Silly.
No, Sor Juana's not silly, but wait until we get a little farther down.
There's
So-
one word that
Sor
you were like,
Juana-
is that really what she means?
Is that really what she's saying? We talked about this. Pedos, right?
I was
Sor
like,
Juana,
yes, that's what she means.
thrush, with none of the ambition of great trees. You were fashioning paradise among the flower pots, and I was cultivating my hips out of air, giant fat like rainbow farts, to cushion over our falls. I had faith and walked that way, unknown with your feathered heart, sleeping just above my own, as if paradise existed, right under my chin, your heart with mine. That Eden did not last. I knew it, but even so, I climbed the air that now cleaves me.
La paz y el éxtasis no alcanzan, siempre acaban, inestables, finitos. No hay recuerdo que traiga a nosotros la presencia. Todo queda en desuso. Se hace y se cubre de polvo. Enamorado he sido. Dicen que lo bailado no se quita. Sin embargo, el baile en la memoria también es tan finito. Su plumaje tan breve se va tornando tan mezquina esa parte que quedó muerta también, como eso que termina, eso tóxico que asociados vamos pasando. Inevitable, temporal, milagro. Despertar es acabar, tapar el pozo de lo amado, nacer a una luz que abraza, en un suelo que arroja.
Peace and ecstasy are never enough. They always end up unstable, finite. There is no memory that can lend us presence. Everything falls out of use, is made and encased in dust, dust in love. They say the good times last forever. Nevertheless, goods are so finite. Even in memory, their feathers so brief, the part that's left ends up being so petty. That remnant died too. Like what ends, the toxin that we keep passing between us. Inevitable, temporal miracle. To awaken is to come, to seal the well of the loved, to be born to a light that burns on hurling ground.
¿Hacemos más?
Sí, como ¿cuántos minutos más, creo? Como
Una sección más.
sí, una sección más o dos
¿Hay
poemas más.
alguno que vos quieras leer en especial,
Ya
Jeannine?
empezamos.
Sí, bueno, empiezo ahora yo en la
Dale.
página 45.
Dale.
On earth and in heaven, always this lantern, earthly or solar rock, from some angle there will be a star, heavy and hollow in the constant hovering of these matters, already settled without remedy. There is no nature in the park. Dream and non-dream decorate the place. Heaven and earth build the horizon, and that shit is human. It belongs to no other animal. So heavy, hill and backpack, ignite an invisible flight, depth with no place. 44.
Ujú. En tierra y cielo, siempre ese candil, roca terrestre o solar, desde algún ángulo será una estrella, pesada y hueca, en el continuo merodear por los asuntos, ya hechos, sin remedio. No hay naturaleza en el parque. Sueño y no sueño decoran el lugar. Cielo y tierra construyen horizonte. Y esa mierda es humana. No pertenece a ningún otro animal. Tan pesadas, cuesta y mochila, combustionan un vuelo invisible, hundimiento sin lugar.
Gracias. Página 60, por favor. Moss on stone, like velvet, at no cost, is precisely the cost. Its friends, bugs and lichens, contemplate like air coral, the same air. Life may be less or more exposed to loss. One's own loss might be a lesser loss. It may be complete, full, a lack that inhabits, that wets the necessary, the stone. But no, neither moss nor stone escape the grief of the cultivated, nor wild coexistence with the bewitching poison of humans.
Musgo en la piedra como terciopelo, sin costo alguno es el costo mismo. sus amigos, los bichos y los líquenes, contemplan, como corales del aire, el mismo aire. ¿Será esa vida menos o más expuesta a la pérdida? ¿Será la propia pérdida una pérdida menor? ¿Será por completa, llena, un vacío que habita, que humedece lo necesario la piedra? Mas no, ni el musgo ni la piedra escapan al duelo del cultivo, ni a la convivencia salvaje con el veneno encantador de los humanos.
Y vamos al fin, 90, ¿sí? Okay. Reflections, barely echoes die in the placenta of dreaming. Interior magma flows, silenced or repressed at our discretion. We believe this, or from the indolence we share. If in truth we swing in the same wind, next to the same trees, how could we not think that they rise up by some miracle? Everything we do favors leaving them aside. Like the already loved, once enjoyed, it dies, far away in its own blood. It happens to the past, but it continues, resounding in tandem. The echo of the park's murmur is the thunder that now astounds. Powerful power can't be kept. Life resounds, rings out, erratic and senseless, right up to the end. There's no support. There's hardly bliss. There is nothing in the ear of the other, even upon waking.
Reflejos, ecos apenas, mueren. En la placenta del sueño, magma interior, va por dentro, silenciado, reprimido, a discreción nuestra, eso creemos, o de la indolencia que compartimos. Si la verdad nos amacamos en el mismo viento, junto a los mismos árboles, ¿cómo no pensar que de milagros se yergan? Todo lo que hacemos prefiere dejarlos de lado, como a lo ya amado, muere por gozado, lejos, en la propia sangre. Sucede al pasado, pero sigue, simultáneo, resonando. El eco del murmullo del parque es el trueno que hoy aturde. Poderoso el poder no se puede mantener. La vida suena, tintinea, errática y sin sentido, hasta que acaba. No hay sostén, apenas hay goce. No hay nada en el oído del otro, aun cuando despierta. Thank you.
Romina, I hope you'll stay with us for a couple of questions.
Yeah, thank you, sure.
Oh, great. So I think I would like to open with a few questions and then open it to everybody else. Oh no, is it going to do that echo thing? Echo of the...
Echo.
The echo of the car?
Headphones out. She took her headphones out. I think that's what you heard.
Okay. Oh, it's good now. Okay. So oftentimes we read translations without the luxury of seeing this dynamic at play. And so I want to take the opportunity to ask you about your process, but more generally, what would you like readers of this book in translation to know about translation? And how would you like them to think about what went on for this book to make it into English?
So the main thing that I would like readers to know about translation is what Dennis already said, that it's not like Google Translate, you know, it's not like you put in an input and the algorithm fixes it for you and you get an output and there it is. I mean, that works for some types of communication, but not for this. So one thing I'd like everyone to know is that translation is an art in itself. It's not a derivative form. You know, it's always, people seem to, when I teach students, people often, like, if a text is really hard, they think, oh, it must be the translation, or it's easy to sort of blame a translator, or else, I don't know, to just sort of see translation as, like, what is it, right? It's not really reading, it's not really writing, and I mean...
To see it as an impediment to the work.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, there's this
Thank
thing
you.
that's gotten in the way of my poem that I want to read, and it's this pesky translation, and this pesky translator who's, yeah.
Right,
exactly.
and being a pesky translator is so much fun. That's the other thing I want people to know. It's really a wonderful process, and it's about connecting with people. It's about community building. The first poet I ever translated was deceased, and working on her was like going on a mystery trail, really, trying to learn about her. And it just, I couldn't talk to her, but I could talk to her family, I could talk to her friends. My parents, who are sitting there, visited me when I was in Uruguay, and we met her sister, and she gave us these terrible fish sticks as a snack. Like, I mean, that's what's behind.
So the poet you're talking about is Marosa Giorgio,
Yes.
who is really has become quite a figure in great part thanks to you and your translations in the United States. And it's funny, you know, I hear about this and I think, oh, Marosa, and then I hear the story about her sister and the fish sticks, and realize how mundane it can feel.
Right? So it's sort of, it's really about, it's about community building, it's about connection, it's about learning new words in Spanish, like the word pedo, which I did not know. And I asked, that's the one I know. I'm so immature. I'm 5. I should go play with Ani, right? So, I mean, I asked about that word, and Romina, and I didn't know it, and Romina was trying to explain it to me, and goes like, and I'm like, okay, now I'm not going to forget that word. So, there's, like, you know, it's, I don't know, people think that poetry is this serious thing, and it's really not. It's just a lot of fun, really.
You had fun talking to, well, it's certainly not, you know, the same as translating somebody who can't ask questions, who can't be a part of the reading process. Te puedo preguntar la misma cosa, Romina. ¿Cómo fue, no sé, tener este libro? How was it for you to have this book translated? What was the process like? Hello, I'm seeing you. What was the process like for you on your end? And is there anything about the work that you would like readers in English to know?
For me, the process of translation with you two was like, wow, like rewriting again the book, because I had to rethink some of the images and try to explain them again to myself even, because I sometimes I write, and I'm a very conscious writer, and I'm a very rational writer, but I don't keep track of every image I write. I just write it. And so in the translation, I had to explain things that were obvious to me, and that was wonderful. I thought that I reread my book again, and I found that I said things that maybe I wasn't so sure I was saying, I don't know. And that was great for me. And then, that process is just, again, having great conversations and growing up. And I don't know, language is the way you feel things, and feeling them in English is new to me. And I hope that this translation carries some of my feelings and some of the Spanish way of feeling things. About the humor, I think all activity from human beings comes from passion, and in passion you have humor. I think laughter is like magic, so it was really magical sometimes, the process of translation, because we really laughed a lot.
Well, I think this kind of raises another another question for me, this idea of the translation as the writing of another work, but one in which, you hope carries through that other work, the Spanish work. And I want to mention that this book, your Eco del Parque in Spanish, was a work of response poetics in itself. It was a work that responded, you've written, it was an intimate dialogue with Primer Sueño by Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz. Since we have you here, this is a great opportunity to ask you about the relationship of Eco del Parque with Primer Sueño, and maybe also ask Jeannine if, looking at this as already a work in response to another, in any way affected the way you thought about it in translation or affected your process. I used to teach a class called Poetry of Response, and I think we've had a conversation about how we feel that poetry is always a response in one way or another to another work. And it's really nice when we can sort of map some of the ways that happens. And so I'd be curious to hear more about the ways that you worked with Sor Juana and the ways that you think Sor Juana comes in. And, this can, maybe just whatever you can share about that is fine.
Well, there's a lot of things to share.
I know, I'm sorry, you don't have to share all of it.
First of all, I really share this thought about conversation and dialogue in poetry and in everything. I really a fan of Mikhail Bakhtin's work, and I think language is just conversation and dialogue. You're always responding to something. But about Sor Juana, well, Sor Juana is just a great figure from the poetry in Latin America and Spanish poetry. And this work of her is like a very original work. It's something that is really, really hard to read in English, in Spanish, sorry. In Spanish itself, it's really hard to read. It's like written in an extraterrestrial language, and that always fascinated me. I started reading it when I was really young, and I didn't understand the word, and I kept reading it, and it fascinated me, and I think I don't understand it yet, but I really enjoy it, and I think it's a philosophical poem like no one else in my language wrote, and that was made by a woman in really fragile social position, and with that really, really inspires me all the time. This is one of my works that dialogue with her, and it has small parts of the poem in between, and the last part of that poem, Sor Juana ends up with El mundo iluminado y yo despierta, the world with lights and me awake. And it's a really bad translation. That end is really important to me because she is the first woman to put this feminine subject in literature in Spanish. Yeah. And my poetry ends up with does nothing in the year of. I'm going to read it in English because does nothing in the year of the other, even upon waking. That's my discovery in this dream of life. It's very bitter, but it also can be very optimistic as well. That is the first part. The other part is very, very domestic. I really like animals, and I had a lot of birds at my place. One of them was called Sor Juana, and it died violently after spending a fortnight in my house and having a very close relationship with me. It slept at my chest, and it was very, very enthusiastic about life. And I really felt its death, and well, in parts of that loss, that little loss, and the fact that she was named Sor Juana made me think about other losses. And well, I don't know if I'm answering the question.
You are, and actually, can we read a little bit of that? Jeannine wants to read a little bit of that part where you refer. One of the parts where you refer directly to Sor Juana. Sor Juana was a pigeon, no? Fue una paloma de la calle.
No, it's not pigeon. I had pigeons. You may have seen pictures of pigeons. That she was a thrush.
She was a thrush, right? Como dice el poema.
Yeah. Yeah, the poem describes her as a thrush. We read that part, but I liked the part, the impossible kiss between lips and beak. We achieved head and chin. They sculpted love that never overcame the common constant battles, daily fighting for space and the space of time. May I make a comment?
Please.
Yeah, so a few things just going off of what Romina has said. So I believe that all writing is translation. That's why, I had my own first book of poetry out, and I say to anyone, if I did it, you can do it as well. Reading, writing is reading. There is really no way to write without reading, and we're always responding to something that has come before. And I think what Romina says is so accurate, both to what we've read and sort of absorbed through a cultural tradition, but also through lived experience. So this book really...
I want to interrupt for a second and say that I'm looking out at a number of poet translators or poets who I know work from other texts or think about, I know Joy, I remember your parentheses of Elizabeth Bishop. The ways that we write that we read as part of our writing, and Piotr and Lauren, and I think it's very vividly true in this room anyway.
Right, and I think that not everyone in this room might know who Sor Juana was, but she was a Mexican woman 400 years ago, right, who became a Catholic sister. And as I understand it, Romina can correct me if I'm wrong, a big part of her reason for becoming a Catholic sister was, I think she very much was a woman of faith, but also it was really the only chance for a woman to get educated in that culture. And she was determined to have an education and to become a writer. So she's really important both for just literary traditions in general, not just in the Spanish-speaking world, but really the global human literary tradition, and also for people of faith as well. It's really, she's a pretty important figure. And I do think it's pretty amazing how Romina was inspired by her work, but also by lived experience, and wrote this text, and then we translated it. I mean, the book has my name on the cover, but Michelle was super active along with me, as was Romina herself. Roman helped as well. And a lot of times, this is, as you probably heard hearing the reading of this text, it's pretty complex. There are a lot of different ideas in it. It's not, you need to sit with it a little while.
It's very philosophical.
Yeah, it's
in
very
the way
philosophical.
Of Sor Juana. Yeah.
It's really it's probably the most difficult thing. Since I've set out to translate something harder than this, but at the time, this was the most difficult thing that I had set out to work on, I would say. And just this thing, impossible kiss between lips and beak, that poem for me is very much about the desire of a human to connect with an animal in a way that's basically impossible, right? And it's the same thing with translation. There's always some gap between the original and the translated text. There's always something that is impossible, but that in itself is not a bad thing. It's kind of, I think, like what Romina is saying about the ending. There's something poignant and difficult about it, but there's something lovely about it too. Maybe the fact that we can't know everything. To me, it's consoling that there are, at least as of now, that might change in 20 years, I don't know, but there are still a few things Google doesn't know, I think, and that Google Translate can't explain.
I love that idea of, I never thought of the impossible kiss between lips and a beak as a metaphor for translation, but it's lovely, and I'm always going to say that now. Credit you. I know that if Romina's willing to stay, I would love to hear if anyone has any questions. I'm sure Jeannine and Romina would be happy. I'd love to hear from the audience. Otherwise, we could move to the table, but
I'm curious to have both the author and translator in one place, and the fact that you know each other. As the author, and you've spoken a little bit about this in your responses earlier, but what's it like to hear your, especially as a fluent speaker and reader of English, what is it like to hear your words in another language? What's that experience like? Is it strange? Is it affirming?
It's still a surprise. I think I haven't heard it all in English yet. I tried to read it myself, but I think I'm going to need to Jeannine to read it to me all one night.
I'd be happy to.
I feel really blessed for this, and I think that I'm like using a new dress, you know. I feel pretty.
So I have a question for the translator. I don't get the name. Jeannine. So you showed a book of yours. Can you read one poem from there?
You want one poem from my book?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right.
I'll say, I'm going to introduce this by saying that Jeannine sent me this book a while ago and told me, now just know this, my poetry is nothing like the work I translate. It's so different. Just be aware of that. And then when I read it, I thought, oh my gosh, I totally see the work you translate in this. But I think that's a beautiful thing. But she doesn't see it so much.
Well, it's not that I don't see the work I translate in it. It's just, we all imitate what we read. The first line of what I'm about to read mentions the Argentine writer Jorge Luis Borges, but it's just, I don't know. All right, this is sort of my signature piece, so I'll read this one. Be forewarned, it's not exactly bright and cheery. All right, when we were human, when we lived in houses like books, lining the shelves of Borges' library, when each of our stories was a hagiography in the Encyclopedia of Saints, when we sat around kitchen tables sipping tea, words floating from our lips like butterflies bearing enormous scrolls, when we unraveled that parchment and still understood the strange cursive letters that moved and flowed like worms beneath the earth, when we stuck our head out the slow train's windows, beneath us rails were singing, when we got lost in a forest of conifers, when we made a wrong turn and ended up in the next town, when we took pictures of wasps, for they too were made of light, when we watched the rain falling gently on mushrooms, when we stepped over wet stones in the dark forest, when we searched for stars in the mist, when the hum of mosquitoes was still the holiest prayer, when the veins of our hands were still roots and flowers sprouted from them as we grew old. Now that we know all movement is rotation, now that we are motionless stars, now that we search for ammonite fossils in the marble floors of shopping malls, reaching to touch the galaxy's spiral, feeling only cracks, now that we neither kneel on pebbles at the river's edge nor stare down at it from high crags, now that we would never stop to stroke the scales of a forest snake, Now that we don't stand up to pray the Angelus at noon, and our voices no longer touch each other like folded hands. Now that all our languages have converged into a single word that we repeat again and again and again. It is said that we have not changed. We are told that we are as we always were. If anything, we are greater now, closer to those angels we once prayed to. We are told we should be grateful as we drift from now to now. We are told that we are still human, but I don't believe it.
Thank you.
Well, I think Jeannine would love to talk to all of you just casually one-on-one. So I will turn it over to John and his flamenco guitar, and maybe Joy and I'll dance. Yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Could I ask a question?
Oh, sure.
That's my mother.
Jeannine, what caused you to be a translator? You never said anything about that.
Well, I mean, people want to hear the guitar, right? But but what caused me to be a translator, it started out that I wanted to read poetry in Spanish. It was as simple as that. And when I was starting to learn the language, I couldn't read it without looking up so many words that I pretty much just started translating it. And that was in the year 2001, and I just have kept going pretty much.
And you've said translation taught you Spanish?
Translation taught me Spanish. Yeah, I mean, I started learning it before that, but I mean, it really taught me it got me past that level of just getting by to actually really being able to engage more deeply in conversations with people.
I think it's amazing that translation does do that for
It does.
It teaches us lots of things. There is
One more
another question. I'm sorry, I closed the whole question thing too soon.
Did you find any images particularly? Is there one that stands out as particularly challenging to translate?
You know, not so much images, I'd say. I mean, Romina, I'm sorry, but the multicolored rainbow farts, I'm still like, really? But, you know, other than that, with all due respect, I mean, I love this book so much, but,
You want to mention, like, the apple pie scandal?
Oh, yeah, the apple pie. This is not from
I wondered if there was anything that...
What I was going to say about this is it's more the sound. For this, it was the sounds. It wasn't the images. It was the sounds. The apple pie scandal is, I once in another book translated something from Uruguay as, the word was pastel de manzanas, and I spent nights agonizing over whether this should be apple cake or apple pie. And people from Uruguay told me apple pie, even though it's not really something eaten there. So it turned out to be fine. But no, this was more about, this I mean, like, it tastes good if it's apple cake or apple pie, right? I mean, but this was really the sounds. This was the big challenge. I mean, there's so much beautiful, yeah, like the internal rhymes, consonants, so repetition of consonant sounds, repetition of vowel sounds, rhythms. That was what was really hard. And it didn't translate in a one-to-one way from Spanish to English. What I worked on and what Michelle really helped closely was how could we find corresponding sounds in English that create their own rhythms and their own patterns. So it was really a case of lost and found. There are just beautiful sounds in Spanish that get lost because English is a very different sounding language. But the real search for throughout this was for sounds. And I don't know, Romina, I mean, I don't really like how English sounds compared to Spanish, but it's up to you to think if you like the sounds at all in English. We tried, you know. I was all excited about once machines and machinations. Where was that? Like it was where was maquinas y mentiras y máquinas. I don't know where that was, but I was all excited about machines and machinations and machines, like trying to, you know, that was a fun discovery in English sometimes, but it was definitely lost and found, is how I describe it.
Can you, Romina, can you read the phrase that corresponds with rainbow-colored farts in Spanish? And can you say one or two things you've proposed or thought, or in the alternatives to that in your conversation? Can you just let us see a little of the conversation you had? Because I'm not sure what you said you had doubts about that phrase, so I'm interested in what.
The rainbow farts. I remember Romana was like, you asked a question, Romana was like, it's rainbow farts. I was like, yeah, it's rainbow farts. And then I wondered if that was a Snapchat thing. Like they have all the rainbow vomit and the unicorn poop. I saw it as like something that was on TV, like on the.
Oh, okay.
But then I don't know if that's how you thought of it.
Fue eso, Romina? Snapchat? Fue
Bueno, no sé
eso?
si fue Snapchat.
No sabemos. Yeah, it was.
I think I'm missing a word here.
No importa, no sé qué. I don't even know what Snapchat really is, but I think it involves things with unicorn poop and other people. Am I right?
Little emoji that vomit and fart and like
No, here we say de colores, color fart for people who has delusions.
for delusions.
Yeah, they say like a nube de pedo is like if somebody's in like a fart cloud.
Yes.
It's an expression in Argentine Spanish.
So does it connect with like brain fart?
Yes,
That
it is
is
very
brain
similar
fart.
to something like brain fart.
So what did you propose or what?
Well, this is. Yeah, I mean, there was nothing to propose. That was it. Like, that was just pretty simple.
Okay.
But I mean, there were other parts where, the parts that were more complex, they really were about the sound. One example is this phrase, nadie te quita el bailado. Bailado is an example, which it's like you only live once would be the way to translate that in English, but what it's actually saying is like whatever you have danced, no one can take that away from you. Mm-hmm. So there's that image of dance, which totally gets lost if you just go idiom for idiom. Mm-hmm. So what to do about that? We talked a lot about that.
What did you decide in the end?
We used like the good times last forever, but goods are so finite. So we turned the dance into goods. Another thing that was like, this is just a simple thing, but like calling somebody che, which is a very Argentine thing. Like we don't really do that in English, so that was something that got lost. It just became hey. Mm-hmm. I almost wanted to keep the che to sort of highlight that cultural aspect. I'm sometimes more of that kind of like keep the original if something's weird and just make a note about it, because again, these certain, like that's where you see there are certain things that don't translate. Idioms are a good example of that. These very intimate expressions that are part of a culture, you know.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, you know, as you're talking, I'm thinking about just the problem of translation, because there are many layers of meaning in because it's poetry, you know. Yeah. There's the sound, which is a layer. There's the idiom, which is one layer. There's the image of rainbows or farts, or there's the diction and what that brings into a mood or into, from the dictionary where it takes you. And there are even more than that, and tones. And so negotiating in translation, what Romina said about it being a rewriting, it makes sense. It has to be, a rewriting in order to have its own layers.
Yeah,
it's hard to select just one.
Which one you would pick? Which one is the most important? Or you could say, well, I don't really want to lose this. So in this instance, I'm willing to sacrifice some sound in order to get this other thing.
Or you can just go crazy and intuitively do your thing and hope and read the poem. You talked about intimate reading. Just be so aware of all of this stuff, and then because you're an amazing poet in your own right, just go for it. Write something, and then hopefully, And so this is the thing.
Yeah.
One thing that was fun was the word habitar así los terrenos imperfectos, parquizarlos de continuo generar la pátina. So to inhabit then imperfect terrain, to parkify it. So that's just a made-up word, and parquizar is not so made up in Spanish in the same way, but I liked the word parkified, even though that's a made-up word, because it really, a big part which we haven't really talked about in this discussion, but the overall theme of what this book is about, I mean, it's about a lot of things, but the thing that really stands out for me is as a work of eco-poetics and what this is saying about the natural world, the human-made world, how we think there's this division between the two, but there's really not. A park is a made space, it's a created space by humans, generally for humans, even if wildlife conservation is part of it. So that's why this word parkified came up as well, especially in the context of Buenos Aires, which is a very large city with not many green spaces and parks, as I understand. I mean, I've been there and I thought there were some, but compared to the amount of people there, right? So just this idea that we are part of nature. It's not like there's us and there's nature, right? We're all nature, even though we think we're separated, and in some ways we are. It's the impossible kiss between lips and a beak, but we are nature. I think that's sort of what people need to start realizing.
I just wanted to say one last thing. For me, it was very, very interesting to find that there were like so many layers in the levels of the word, that there were so elevated words as well as so domestic words, or even shocking words for poetry, and that was really interesting to see how Michelle and how Jeannine looked at those words and the way they read it and the way I read it. That was an interesting discussion, and I think we were very I can find the word in English, but we were very atentas. ¿Cómo lo digo, chicas? Estuvimos muy atentas.
Yeah, we were very attentive and alert and intense too. All those things.
Sounds exhausting.
Yeah, but for me it was really, really wonderful to discover the lection you did from some words that maybe it was not my first choice, but then talking about it, it was like, okay, yeah, I see your point. That tension and that attention was really important to me, and that was really, really nice.
Well, can we have one round of applause for Jeannine and for Romina? Qué triste que no esté acá. Quizá en febrero, pero casi.
Hola.
Bueno.
Okay. Jeannine. Roman.
Okay, bye everybody.
That was something.